Hello, welcome to Borderline Obsessed Travels, Highpoints, Tripoints, Counties, National Parks. Today we're going to New York, Mount Marcy, the highest point in New York State, and you're welcome to come with me. On the way to and from Mount Marcy, I decided to also get the remaining counties that I was missing in Pennsylvania and New York, but I did not film it because I know that that is objectively boring. I also debated going back to the Massachusetts, New York, Vermont Tri-Point, which I attempted in the past when I was like doing the New England high points, and I got kind of close to it, but then it got very bushwhacky, so I turned back. I debated going back and trying that again, either from the same direction and just toughing it out, or there's also another approach from a different direction, but I've heard that both of them are like pretty difficult to get to. So I'm just abandoning that Tri-Point for now. I don't really feel like doing it. What I'm really hoping happens is that sometime in the future, Williams College will build like a real trail to that Tri-Point. I have no reason to believe that that will actually happen, but that is kind of what happened with the Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania Tri-Point. Like 5 years ago, White Clay built a real trail to that Tri-Point. So I'm just hoping the same thing happens with this Tri-Point, and in the future, I can come here and it'll be super easy to get to that Tri-Point. I am parked near the trailhead to Mount Marcy, the highest point in New York right now. I'm gonna be sleeping in my car near the trailhead. On the road that leads to the trailhead, there's like a dirt road with dispersed camping on it, so that's where I am. I'm planning on trying to get to the trailhead, which is just like a few miles away, pretty early tomorrow morning, because I hear that the lot can fill up pretty quickly, and if it's full, you have to park like a few miles away, and then that adds to the hike, which this is a pretty long hike. It's not peak season, and it's also not a weekend, so I'm not expecting it to be totally full, but you know, just in case. I think tomorrow's gonna be one of the last like temperate days before it really becomes winter up here, so it might be a little busy because of that. So this is a pretty long hike. It's 7 or 8 miles to the peak, so like 15 or 16 total. This will be, I think, my longest high point, except for if you include Mount Whitney, which I attempted earlier this summer. My partner's knees kind of gave out at around the 7 or 8 mile mark, so we did around 15 or 16 miles on the Mount Whitney trail, but did not make it to the peak. Again, this is a pretty long hike, like 15 or 16 miles total. I think there's 3,300 feet of elevation gain, so it doesn't seem like it'll be that steep, but it's still a long hike, so I'm not expecting it to be easy or anything. I also hear that it can be very, very muddy and kind of scrambly. It's a little before 7 in the morning, and I just parked at the trailhead. This is at the Adirondack Lodge, Lodge spelled with a J for some reason. And we're outside the town of Lake Placid, and also the lake of Lake Placid, and it costs $15 to park here if you are not a member. There were not many cars in the parking lot when I got here, which was good, because I overslept longer than I wanted to this morning. It's probably in like the 50s right now. It's not that cold. I don't know what the temperature at the peak is going to be. It is going up 3,000 some feet, so I expect it to, you know, potentially get below freezing, but probably not like terribly below freezing. I have 2 liters of water with me, and I might need more, so I do have a water filter with me because I've heard there's ample opportunities to filter water. There are a bunch of trails around here. If you wanted to like make some sort of complicated loop, definitely could. I took a picture of the map. If I need it, I have it, but hopefully things are marked decently. And I don't like own micro spikes, but I've heard people recommend that if you do have them, bring them. It has already snowed here, but it's been like warm-ish the last few days, so I'm hoping there's not like a bunch of ice anywhere. It's been drizzling most of the time that I've been hiking. A lot of the hike has been on a path like this. Like you're just walking through a pretty low stream. It is really muddy. My shoes are completely wet. And I feel like I've been almost above the tree line for miles now, but there's still trees. I hope this is almost the end. On a clear day, you can see Canada from here. This is not a clear day. This is the highest point in New York and the 21st highest state high point in the U.S., Mount Marcy at 5,344 feet. So I realized that video ends kind of abruptly. It was very rainy at the top and I was scared to pull out my phone too often. I have some notes about the rest of this hike. So it was about 65 degrees at the trailhead that day, and at the peak it was probably in the 30s and it was very rainy. It was not rainy at the trailhead. Once you get up near the top, you start seeing signs that say like, weather subject to very extreme, very quick changes. Believe those signs. So I did mention this in the video, but I didn't get videos of the worst parts of it. Portions of the trail are just in a stream. Portions of it, you're walking through a stream that the water is like flowing and like maybe this high, and that's just what the trail is. It was raining at the peak the day I was here, but I really can't imagine a scenario in which like you would stay dry ever on this trail. The honest advice is get your feet wet early, because before my feet were wet, I was taking my time like hopping from rock to rock, trying to keep my feet from getting wet, but it's inevitable. Like your feet are gonna get wet, and the earlier you accept it and just let your feet get wet, the easier the trail gets, because now you don't have to like jump from rock to rock. You can just walk through the water or walk through the mud and not worry about it. You can totally do this as a backpacking trip. There are plenty of places like designated camping spots. So big portions of this trail were extremely wet. Big portions of this trail are also on rock. Luckily, it's not the type of rock that gets super slick when it's wet. I slipped and almost fell a few times, but I did not fall the whole time I was on this trail. So if things are just wet, it's not like the rocks are going to be super slick. However, if it's icy, that would be a huge problem. It took me 3 hours and 45 minutes to get to the peak from the trailhead, and it probably took me 4.5 hours to get down, just because I like hurt both of my hips and was going extremely slow by the end. So I wouldn't necessarily say that this trail is scrambly, but the last half mile or so, once you get above the tree line, it's just very steep, and sometimes it's like boulder steps that are just very tall. So I needed to use my hands a little bit just because things were tall, but it wasn't like difficult technically. I'd say definitely bring hiking poles, because going down it's very steep and being able to stabilize yourself is useful. And then something very goofy happened while I was up there. I assumed that I had made it to the peak about a quarter mile before I actually made it to the peak. When you are in the trees, the trail markers are like blue plastic blazes that are screwed into the trees. When you get above the tree line, the trail markers change to painted blazes that are just on the rocks. So that's what I was following. I followed these painted blazes up a pretty steep area, and I made it to like a relative peak. There was nothing obviously higher immediately around me, and there was a big rock cairn at the top of this one relative peak, and that was the first rock cairn of this hike, which made me assume that probably means it's the peak, because rock cairns are often used as like peak markers. And it was so foggy that I could not see that I very obviously was not at the peak yet. If it had been a clear day, I could have like turned around and seen, oh, Mount Marcy is right there, but it was so foggy that I could not see Mount Marcy. And there were several more rock cairns, which I'm assuming they were like the original trail markers, probably the type of thing where you make it to one rock cairn and then from there you should be able to see the next one, which you then walk to. But it was so foggy that I couldn't see any other rock cairns. So I assumed that I had made it to the peak. I turned around, started going down the mountain, and then I kind of got a bad feeling and like pulled out my phone and made sure I had actually made it to the peak, and I hadn't. So I had to turn back around and go another like quarter mile, pretty uphill at that point. The last part was pretty, again, not really rock scrambly, but just very steep. Yeah, if you're there on a very foggy day, just be aware that there are rock cairn trail markers, and the first rock cairn you see is not the peak. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want, or don't if you don't, and I will see you later. Bye.